In South Carolina, South Carolinians turning out in record numbers.
The numbers were astronomical.
Voters making decisions that shape our communities, from the governor's race to attorney general.
From representation right here in the Midlands all the way to our nation's capital. Tonight, WIS has crews across the state bringing you live election results as they come in.
These races impact your family, your taxes, your schools, your future.
I think it's important for our political process to select candidates that will represent us and have our voices heard.
Whether or not we're black, white, Asian, Dominican, Israel, Zionist, or whatever, we all need to come together and just vote.
This is your voice.
Your vote, your decision 2026.
WIS 10 is your first alert to the South Carolina primary. This is Decision 2026.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome into our WIS Decision 2026 digital coverage. For the next 2 hours, we will be bringing you live reports really until the results come in tonight from across South Carolina. In-depth coverage right here in our WIS studio.
Our Billie Jean Shaw tracking the latest numbers at the WIS Results Center, and several analysts here offering their insight on all things politics on this very exciting primary evening.
So wherever you are watching on our digital platforms, be sure to share the coverage. If you're on Facebook or other social media, send us your questions. We'll be jumping in with our panelists and our debate or analysts, our political analysts this evening as the results come in. But we're going to start our live team coverage tonight with the historic race to become the next governor of South Carolina. Results are already coming in a highly contested race for the Republican nomination.
Here's a look at the current totals. Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette with the lead right now, 29% of the vote to Alan Wilson's 25% of the vote, and Rom Reddy coming in at 17%, as well as Ralph Norman at 17% as well. 23% of the vote is counted so far, and it shows a hotly contested race. And it doesn't look like a clear majority by any means, at least in the Republican primary. It looks like if this holds, and again, 23% of the vote in, it's very likely that we will see a runoff in that race.
Yeah, that'll be certainly a big point of discussion throughout the evening. We also have crews at all three of the respective watch parties right now, obviously covering the Democratic side of this ticket as well, where Democrat Jermaine Johnson has been leading all night. And on the Democratic side of this ticket, they have even more of the vote in, more than 36% of the vote in so far. We'll be diving into those numbers all coming up in just a moment.
But we got to get to our live crews who are scattered throughout the state to give you full primary coverage here on all of our digital platforms. We start with our Hannah Burbank live in Greenville at Pamela Evette's watch party. And Hannah, with these numbers starting to come in, I imagine that the atmosphere there is definitely a lot of excited supporters.
Greg and Judy, you've said it. I mean, this is a competitive race, and it is really just getting underway, but you can already start to feel the anticipation build at Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette's watch party here in Greenville. Obviously, a competitive race with a strong likelihood of a runoff to happen, but speaking with Evette's campaign earlier today, they say she is confident. She is feeling good going into tonight. Now, is that to secure a solid victory right off the bat or go off to a runoff election? But, I mean, voters are going to be the one to decide that. Again, still tracking those early numbers coming in, showing Evette with that slim but early lead over her fellow candidates. Really, really eager to watch throughout the night. A lot of eyes on this race, vying to be the Republican nominee to be our next governor of South Carolina. So obviously we'll be keeping track of these results as they roll in, as well as watching that map to see where the counties are shifting as each county gets results rolling in. I know we have a wonderful interactive map on our website, as well as what Billie Jean has been showing us. So we're keeping a close eye on the race here in the upstate, and of course we'll be checking in with you guys throughout the night. But reporting in Greenville, I'm Hannah Burbank, WIS News 10.
In with our live team coverage all around the state. Alan Wilson also having a watch party tonight at a restaurant in downtown Columbia as these results come in to see where he lands in what is expected to be a runoff tonight. Our Nick Neville is there.
Yeah, Nick, what's the atmosphere like where you are?
Judy, Greg, well, just as Hannah said, they are feeling optimistic here at the Wilson camp as well. When I spoke to the campaign earlier this afternoon. They were suggesting, however, that they expect this to be a long night. And stop me if you've heard this before, they were suggesting that turnout is going to be key. Just based on those numbers that we've already seen, as you mentioned off the top of this digital newscast here, perhaps unsurprisingly, Attorney General Alan Wilson is having a strong showing in the Midlands area of the state, right centered around Columbia. Well, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette is getting really strong support in the upstate area. We should note it's been a long road for the state's top prosecutor to get to this moment. He became the nation's youngest attorney general when he was first elected back in 2010 at 37 years old. Now, 15 years later, he's looking to move into the governor's mansion and stand out among this crowded Republican field. Wilson's campaign says he's simply looking to advance to what in all likelihood is expected to be a runoff 2 weeks from now. And of course, those early results are showing that as well. Throughout the campaign, Wilson has emphasized topics like affordability, public safety, and conservative values. Supporters point to his tenure as AG, highlighting efforts targeting illegal immigration, drug trafficking, internet crimes against children, and fighting back against efforts he's deemed as federal overreach. His campaign also pushing back on that endorsement of one of his rivals in this race, Pamela Evette, the lieutenant governor, who at this point is in the lead, slim lead, but in the lead nonetheless. His campaign is saying that voters will be able to discern whether an endorsement is a political favor or that on the merits of this race. His team thinks that he has a strong case to be made, and he has the support of, as they told me, 80% of the Republican sheriffs in the state. Unsurprising, given his close work with them as the state's top prosecutor. And we should note, Alan Wilson was there every day of that 6-week murder trial for Alec Murdaugh in 2023. Of course, that conviction overturned, but we should note that just a few minutes ago, we saw several members of the Murdaugh prosecution team, including John Meadors, who delivered that closing argument way back in 2023 in Walterboro. Many of you watching this digital coverage right now may remember that. So Alan Wilson still has the backing of some of those members who were on that team. We'll be tracking the results very closely here as they continue to roll in. But as of right now, as Hannah mentioned, very close, and the campaign is expecting that. They were expecting a long night. Certainly looks like that could be the case here. We'll send it back to you in the studio, Greg and Judy.
Thank you very much. We need to get to the Low Country now. We understand that our Derek Rush is standing by with the Reddy campaign. And Greg, it's important to realize Ron Reddy was a late addition here. We did our first GOP Republican gubernatorial debate. Ron Reddy had just entered the race. That was back in April.
Yeah, certainly. A lot of money poured into that race from Ron Reddy. And it looks like, at least so far, it's paying off because as of right now, he is running third, tied with Ralph Norman, about 17% of the vote. Our Derek Rush standing by right now tonight to give us the mood there. Derek, I imagine that they're more than pleased with the turnout so far and how these results are shaping up.
Yes, guys. Yes, there was a very jovial sound here earlier. War room right now, all eyes on the screens at the laptops at the table and the big screen as well as we are awaiting the final results. You can see here right now, Pamela Evette in the lead with Alan Wilson second. Ron Reddy, though, coming in third, but gaining with 22,000, just over 22,000 votes being tallied right now. We're going to bring in campaign manager Wes Donahue to kind of talk to us a little bit more about what we're seeing on screen right now. Wes, thank you for joining us. First and foremost, how do you feel right now just seeing where things stand?
Yeah, optimistic, man. I mean, look, there's still a ton of votes out. We're about, let's see, there's about 10,000 votes out of second place, but then a county can come in and bring in 20,000 votes like that. So what's really interesting in different candidates, when you got this many people, different candidates are strong in different parts of the state. So, you know, some of Pam's bases come in, some of Alan's base has come in, but our base hasn't come in yet. So any minute now we should be shooting up pretty quick.
You know, seeing what we're seeing on the screen here, how does that make you feel knowing that, to many people's point, you know, Mr. Reddy was a late addition to the heat?
Yeah, I mean, we were literally at zero place, and we were in first place before the Trump announcement. And then the Trump announcement was like dropping a grenade in the middle of this thing that threw all of our numbers off. But honestly, man, people are just sick and tired of the just insider kind of political BS. They're ready for an outsider, which is why, I mean, honestly, the turnout has been pathetic today because people are just sick of the crowd.
You know, we're going to have a lot of updates as we continue to keep our eyes on the screen. Votes continuing to come in across the state, and we'll give you those updates as we receive them. For now, we'll send it back to you guys in the studio so we can get a update on some of the other areas that this race is taking place right now.
All right, Derek, thanks so much for that. Let's get over to our Billie Jean Shaw at the WIS results desk as she's taking a look at some of these hard numbers that are coming in, because after all, Billie Jean, that's all that matters right now are these vote totals.
Comes all down to the numbers, Greg and Judy. I'm in our First Alert Election Results Center with Dr. Todd Shaw in the Political Science Department at USC. Dr. Shaw, we've been looking at these numbers. A lot of eyes on the governor's race tonight. So let's start there. One of the biggest races we've been following. Jermaine Johnson on the Democratic side has been leading all night. For context, only about 186,000 votes coming in right now, as you can see. But if we take a closer look, he's really dominating across the state right now. Let's take a look at Richland County. He has 55% of the votes there. Lexington County, 53%. And another person that we were closely watching who he was up against was Billy Webster. Right. Explain to our viewers why you said you were keeping an eye specifically on Lexington County and the upstate when it came to these totals.
Well, Lexington County, in the sense that it's a good bellwether county. Out, Richland and Lexington sort of compete in the sense one leaning more Democratic, one leaning more Republican, and so as candidates on either side, you kind of want to have some sense about how well you're doing there. But also, of course, the upstate being very important to the Republican vote and being a solid basis of Republican support. But as a Democratic candidate, if you're doing well there, does that bode well in terms of you securing the nomination, but then also conceivably up the road for a general election.
I find it interesting because when we look at the candidates who are leading right now on the Democratic side, we see Mullins-McLeod is here, but it's really coming down as of what time is it? 8:24.
That's right.
Between Jermaine Johnson and Billy Webster. And Jermaine Johnson entered this race with legislative experience and arguably the highest profile among Democrats. But then you had Billy Webster, a businessman who was endorsed by some notable Democrats. Think about Bakari Sellers, Mayor Steve Benjamin, who even had a campaign ad for him, or with him rather. So what does that tell us about what we're seeing right now with these numbers and grassroots campaign versus endorsement?
Well, I'm going to say that this election, this primary season has been about the early vote, particularly on the Democratic side. And I think there's been some factors, the question around redistricting, that really kind of made a big difference. And I suspect when we look at that vote for Johnson, if he maintains such a dominant lead, we're going to have to ask how much did that early vote fundamentally contribute to that total.
Absolutely. And now let's take a look at the Republican primary for the gubernatorial race right here. We see that Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette is leading right now. Closely behind her, though, is Attorney General Alan Wilson. So what I found interesting about this race, and I want you to explain a little bit more to our viewers, is that Pamela Evette came into this race with two things that no other candidate had: an endorsement from President Trump and also the sitting lieutenant governor. What does that tell us about the endorsement from Trump? Is that helping at this point with the results we're seeing right now, or is it something that could make her fall behind?
It will definitely help in the South Carolina GOP primary. But of course, the Attorney General is a very high profile office in this state as well. And so it's sort of matching one resume to another in that regard. And Alan Wilson would certainly be, as long as he has served as Attorney General, would certainly be known among sort of the GOP establishment and base in this state. So it's going to be neck and neck between them.
Absolutely. And let's take a little closer look at how they're doing in specific counties. You mentioned the upstate. We're still waiting for some numbers to come in, but right now in Spartanburg County, Ram Reddy is leading there. But if we take a look closer to the Low Country where he's from and where he's at, Alan Wilson is leading in Charleston County at this point. Let's take a look at Richland County right now. We see that Alan Wilson leading there. Pamela Evette looking more so toward Horry County. We're seeing some heat there, and I want to explain to our viewers where you see right here these darker colors, okay? That is showing us that that's where a candidate is heavily winning in that area. The lighter the color, that means that they're getting some votes there, but not as much. So we're keeping our eye on that. But if we take a look at, let's say, Lexington County, right? Again, you said Lexington County really sets the stage for who could be the nominee. Explain to our viewers in regards to what that means for our Republican primary for the gubernatorial race.
Again, you know, the upstate may be more determinative, but you don't discount Lexington County and become the nominee for governor in the state. So you got to keep a close eye on that, and particularly, again, since it's an offset to the Midlands, Richland County.
Absolutely. So we're going to keep a close eye on the governor's race. I do want to let you know that one of the races was just called. Comptroller General Tiffany Boozer winning that race. The AP calling that just a short time ago. She will now face the Republican uncontested candidate Mark Brookhart there in that race. And so that's Tiffany Boozer there. We'll keep you updated with all the election results coming out of our First Alert Center. Dr. Shaw and I will be checking back in with you in just a short time.
All right, Billie Jean, thanks so much. We also learned that Congressman Jim Clyburn has won. The results coming in very quickly out of SC6. Clyburn winning and released a statement. We'll get that to you shortly. But again, very decisive there. Of course, that district in particular, the epicenter of the redistricting fight.
Yeah.
Jim Clyburn cruising tonight to victory there.
Listen, we are also hearing that there is a lot of excitement at the Jermaine Johnson headquarters tonight. That is where our Lena Allen is standing by. Lena, I don't know if you have access to the latest numbers, but with 45% of the Democratic vote in so far, Jermaine Johnson is leading with 58% of the vote, has been in the lead since the first numbers were reported tonight. Billy Webster currently at 30%. 31%, 30.9 to be exact, and Mullins McLeod trailing far behind at 10.5%.
Yeah, so decisive so far. Our Lena Allen, again, standing by. Lena, what can you tell us about what's happening at the Johnson headquarters?
You can hear the excitement. The crowd has grown within the last hour. Everybody is pumped, and they are getting live voting results, hearing that Johnson is leading. Campaign leaders told me earlier that they're confident they'll take home the win tonight. Now, Johnson is currently ahead by, with 30% of the votes counted. Supporters tell me they're here to celebrate history, hoping that a win in the primary takes Johnson all the way, making him the first black governor in South Carolina. Now, Johnson's campaign says he's been tirelessly putting boots on the ground across the state, speaking to voters and sharing his plans for a new South Carolina. There's still a long way to go before all of the official results are in, but these early voting numbers are giving supporters here a boost of confidence. You can see everybody has their signs. They've got the music going, and we are still waiting for Johnson to get here. He's expected to give remarks around 8:30, so he should be here in just a few from what I'm hearing from campaign leaders. But we'll continue to keep an eye out here on the ground. Sending it back to you all in studio.
All right, Lena, thank you so much for that update. It is time now to get into our analysis that we've been promising. Already have had a great conversation tonight. Now we can start to take a deeper dive. Delighted to have joining us live in studio tonight political strategist Antoine Seawright, former state senator Katrina Shealy, and former state senator Joel Lurie. And Antoine, I'm going to start with you because you came in tonight expecting that your party, the Democrats, were going to have a runoff in this gubernatorial race. You still think that's the case?
It's not looking that way, and I based on the number of candidates and based on the resources that was put into the race and who was spending and who was not spending, and that was kind of how I came to my conclusion. But you can't underestimate the emotions of the moment. When you think about this intentional effort to eliminate and exterminate black political representation, you have a qualified African-American candidate on the ballot.
Talking about the redistricting fight.
We had a very controversial court ruling in Richland County, Jermaine Johnson's home county, that has drove out some of the emotions of everyday people who normally don't participate in politics, who are starting to weigh in. That has driven out some enthusiasm and a number of other things where people feel like black political representation is an endangered species in this moment. And I think that's helpful, but not to mention Jermaine Johnson has been running this campaign for a year, and he's been traveling the state, talking to voters, and there's something exciting about the idea of something new.
Yeah, and the question, too, in this race, Billy Webster had some pretty high-profile endorsements here, and they're, at least going into it, to your point, Antoine, there was, I think, a lot of speculation that perhaps this would be much tighter than what it is right now. How big of a surprise is this to you, Joel?
Greg, we were talking earlier. I felt like, just from everyone I was talking to, getting polling data was very hard, but everyone I was talking to, they were talking about the buzz around Jermaine's race. And so it was really interesting to see, and you go back to 2010 when Vincent Shaheen was running against Jim Rex and Robert Ford, okay? Two very well-known opponents in Senator Ford and Superintendent Rex. Vincent had all the resources and had much more time on television and won without a runoff. So there was this theory, could that happen for Webster? But to Antoine's point, there's a buzz right now. There's a sense of energy around Jermaine Jackson that he offers something new to the Democratic Party.
Jermaine Johnson, but we like Jermaine Jackson
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
Go ahead. It's all good.
Right, I was a big
You went to
Jackson
see the
fan.
Michael movie. I know. it's fine.
He just watched the
It's
Michael
fine.
Jackson movie.
Randy, Tito, Michael. But anyway, okay. But my point is, there's a buzz around his campaign.
There is.
There's
and
a
you
buzz.
know what's remarkable to me, Katrina, is that at one point he was thinking about suspending his campaign and not doing this.
Right.
And people rallied on social media, and the conversation was Facebook, social media is not voting, but clearly he has rallied real, substantial, tangible support.
There were Democrat operatives that called Jermaine. Jermaine and I are good friends.
Mhm.
I mean, we are, I work well across the aisle with people like Joel Lurie.
Absolutely.
And Jermaine called me and he said, I'm thinking about getting out of the race. I'm talking, Billy Webster's getting into the race, and there were strong Democrat supporters that were supporting him. And he said, maybe I'll just stay in my House seat and do that. And so he seriously considered getting out of the race. I'm glad he didn't, but I like Jermaine a lot.
3 quick things. Sometimes endorsements bring out some of your friends, but
Sure.
they bring out all of your opposition.
Got it.
And endorsements don't always transfer or translate in races. The other thing is every successful major movement in history of this country has always been fueled by young people under the age of 50 and it has had African Americans leading the charge. I think tonight may be another layer to the catalog of that. And then thirdly, there's this idea and that sometimes we count people out, and those people usually teach us that we don't know how to count. And I think Jermaine so far has proven to some of us that we don't know how to count.
We interviewed Jermaine Johnson on our podcast shortly after he decided to stay in. And I could tell in his voice he was still really unsure of himself, and he felt like he had to stay in for the next candidate that somebody's going to try to talk out of running. But over time, Greg and Judy, he caught fire. And sometimes you catch fire at the right time. Antoine and Katrina both have spoken about sort of the reapportionment debate, the gutting of the Voting Rights Act by the Supreme Court. He's just that candidate that's caught the momentum at just the right time.
And like young Joe Lurie and younger Katrina Sheila when they ran for office, when Joe Lurie and Katrina Sheila ran for office, the reason they were successful because they were able to put together a new coalition of voters that people have not seen before. Jermaine Johnson tonight has put together a unique coalition of voters that I don't think the South Carolina Democratic Party experiment has seen before, and I think that's part of the reason you see in this surge.
Yeah, so, especially in the context of a Democratic primary, you're talking about all the, potential factors that fueled Jermaine Johnson's catching the right moment per se, but as it bodes to perhaps a general election type fight, the question is, and Katrina, I guess I'll pose it to you, was Webster perhaps maybe more of a centrist candidate, and in a general election, who would fare better? Would it be a Jermaine Johnson, or would it be a Billy Webster in a statewide race, a general election rather than a primary?
Well, I've heard both.
Yeah.
I've heard people like my good friend Antoine say that Billy Webster is the type of person that more people are going
coalesce around.
Yeah, right, and older black people, and for lack of a better term, feel more comfortable than having a young black male run for office. And I've heard it not just from the Antoine age group, but I've heard it from other people.
Well, that's been the debate on social media. Is South Carolina ready for a black governor?
A young black governor.
Should we even be asking that question? But that's the question that people were contemplating.
But Jermaine is a genuine type person. I think he's a moderate Democrat. And I think that that's maybe what people are looking for, a moderate, maybe a moderate Republican or a moderate Democrat, but not, we're so far to the right on one side or so far to the left, there's got to be a happy medium. I think Jermaine can be that happy medium for the Democrats, and maybe somebody that's not happy with whatever the Republicans end up with, that kind of put the Republicans off into not showing up to vote because they couldn't find anybody they wanted to vote for.
Yeah.
You know, maybe he can be that happy medium.
One word you can't measure in polling and data is authenticity. And that, I think he represents so well, and I think that connects with the younger voters you have talked to. I think that connects with everyday people who may not do politics for a living or for a given as some of us do, but the authenticity of his candidacy and the directness, who can talk to someone from the street to the suite, PhD to no degree, I think that matters.
Yeah, and we're seeing another race that's been called, Greg, is Annie Andrews.
Yeah, Annie Andrews in the Democratic senatorial primary, looking as though she will face whoever comes out of the Republican, and it looks like Lindsey Graham is running
leading
away
right
with
now
it,
with
but
about
yes.
60% of the vote.
Correct. So, you know, a potential race between Annie Andrews and Lindsey Graham, the sitting senator here in South Carolina. And again, this was decisive in this race here. Annie Andrews spending a lot on ads, a lot of advertising in this race, and putting herself out there. The doctor, of course. And the question is, you know, what sort of challenge do we see her posing in a general election?
Well, you got to go back to 2020, the last time Senator Graham had a race, and it was Jamie Harrison, who basically, you know, had Fort Knox, you know, in terms of the amount of money he was spending. Antoine and I wanted to be his consultants, just right.
Retired.
Right, but. And then, and Jamie's a dear friend of ours, and he didn't do that much better than any other candidate that ever run. I want to guess around 46%. Does that sound about right? And so, what does it take for Annie Andrews to get above that? What does it take? Can she get to 50.1? Or does she do a little bit better? Or does she not do any better? Things are different. Remember, in 2020, you had Trump on the ticket. And although he lost nationally, he still did very well here.
Yeah, coattails.
Right. You don't have Trump on the ticket. There's a lot of frustration with Senator Graham. Annie Andrews has already started hitting him pretty hard on the media, on the airwaves. So it'll be a fascinating race.
I also think we did not have an affordability crisis the way we see it now.
Sure.
We were not in a war of choice that Graham and Trump have been responsible for. And I think that when the party's in charge, sometimes the environment will force us to vote against the party in charge. We saw that on the Democratic side in the 2024 presidential election, and I think that could be transferable or replicated, if you will, in the midterm election this year. And we're kind of seeing that trend all across the country because Democrats have outperformed the narrative in every single race since Donald Trump has taken office, and won in places that Trump has won double digits. South Carolina could be pregnant for possibilities.
Well, listen, we're going to check in with Billie Jean in just a moment, but Katrina, I want to use you as kind of the segue to Billie, because the other big race we need to check on is the Attorney General's race. What are the keys that you're looking for there to see what the ultimate, who the ultimate winner is?
Well, in this race, Stumbo was endorsed by Trump.
Right.
And that just happened, I think, you know, like last week or something. Stumbo was endorsed by Trump. So what I saw, the last numbers I saw on that, I think Goldfinch was leading in that race. And Pasco has been blasted by everybody on the airways. But, you know, they're using he was a Democrat, and, you know, he switched parties to run as a Republican. I think that if Goldfinch can keep those numbers up, he's going to come out without this being in a runoff. So, I mean, that's where I see this headed.
Well, let's check in with Billie Jean Shaw right now to see exactly where those numbers stand. Billie Jean?
Well, we'll drop some.
Hi, Judy and Greg. Thank you so much. Katrina, thank you for the good segue, because that's exactly what we are taking a look at. If we can pull the numbers up full so that we can take a moment to just see where we are right now in the state. Stephen Goldfinch leading right now with about 43% of the vote. And Dr. Shaw, I want to bring you in. At this point, Goldfinch has established a clear lead, but the bigger story here may be whether he can get above that 50% mark. Right now, the numbers suggest the race could be headed possibly for a runoff, it would be between Goldfinch and Stumbo. Is this essentially becoming a two-man race at this point?
I believe it will be, and we'll sort of see. There's another tagline that we're thinking about in this overall election season is that, and to what degree is President Trump's endorsement, how is it mattering, particularly on the GOP side, of course. And so, that endorsement for Stumbo, but Goldfinch is leading. We'll have to see exactly where things fall out.
And let's talk about Pasco, because right now he's third and he's last with the current numbers we have. Where would his supporters likely go for a runoff?
That's a good question. Within the GOP, you kind of have these divides along sort of the conservative establishment wing of the party, but the sort of the MAGA wing can be divided as well.
Yeah.
And so it'll be intriguing to see. In fact, we may know by tonight, in some regards, exactly where they'll go. At least some portion of them, if in fact he pulls third.
Absolutely, and obviously this is the first open AG's race in 15 years, and of course with the Alec Murdaugh trial, it's been getting a lot more attention about the South Carolina Attorney General. That person then obviously would lead that retrial for Alec Murdaugh. Does that play a part into who may be elected tonight for the primaries?
I think so. It certainly has played into the ads around the question about who's tough on crime, who's law and order. I think those are or boilerplate appeals for a GOP candidate. So, yeah, I'm certain it will play into it.
Okay, absolutely. So right now, again, we're taking a look at where we are in the state with the Attorney General Republican primary. They will be going up against Richard Rissick, who's the uncontested Democrat. And one cool tool that we have here is to do a zoom in and to see how people are performing within specific counties. So you've been bringing up Lexington County a lot tonight. We see that Stephen Goldfinch is leading there, but it's still really close with David Stumbo, considering that endorsement from Trump. We're also taking a look at Richland County, and we still see that Stephen Goldfinch is leading there. So if we come back out to the totals and look at the bigger picture, we can see the color map and the key there from David Stumbo and Goldfinch to see what's happening. Are you surprised, though, about David Pasco trailing at this point?
Yeah, that's intriguing. Again, as been said earlier, there was this sort of a strong critique about, a Democrat who became a Republican. So, is he a rhino Republican in name only, with sort of the charge leveled against him. We'll see how much that mattered to voters.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to check in with our election results. We'll head to break, taking a look at U.S. House District 6 with Congressman Clyburn, who obviously was the center of a lot of national attention with redistricting.
No doubt.
Does this come as a surprise to you?
Not at all. Not at all. And in some ways, again, I think this whole discussion about what happened with the redistricting debate and fight in the State House and the way in which voters were mobilized in order to make a case about redistricting, particularly, of course, on the Democratic side, we're going to see this have ripple effects throughout this primary.
Absolutely. We have about 12,000 total votes coming on in for the U.S. House District 6 on the Republican side. John Peterson leading that race, and we'll make sure to keep you updated. Let's send things back to Greg and Judy now for more insight from our experts.
Thank you so much. We have some breaking news for you. First of all, we hear from our team up in the newsroom. They're tracking all of the races that Mace has conceded and endorsed Alan Wilson. So that is certainly big news tonight. We also heard from Antoine that Jermaine Johnson has called his own race. Now, we haven't gotten the numbers from the AP, but he still has a commanding lead.
Yes, the AP not yet calling this race, but again, via text, Jermaine Johnson declaring victory tonight in the Democratic primary for governor. Again, very decisive, the results looking very favorable for Jermaine Johnson. So he has, in fact, declared victory in that race. But back to Nancy Mace conceding and throwing her support behind Alan Wilson in the Republican gubernatorial primary here, and we'll see how that all shakes out, especially as we continue to watch the top of the ticket here. You can see it is pretty close between Pamela Evette and Alan Wilson, separated by, just about 6,000 votes or so, 43% in. Curious as to where the returns are coming from, which areas of the state have tallied their votes so far and by how much, because after all, the upstate looks to be an area where you might see more support for Pamela Abbott. And again, Judy, we do have that that final confirmation in
the
Jermaine
Associated Press has now called the race for Jermaine Johnson. He will proceed as the Democratic nominee for governor in South Carolina.
How about that? Greg, I want to go back to your Nancy Mace endorsement.
Yeah.
I think it's important that our audience understand her endorsing Alan Wilson. Remember, this is the same guy. She went on the floor of Congress, last year, and just ripped him a good one, right? Held up pictures and saying that he wasn't doing enough in South Carolina. And the fact that she has now endorsed him, it's a very significant development tonight.
And I think Congressman Lacy Clay wrote this in his book: no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. And I think her level of festivity with Donald Trump has led to this. But I want to make one important point about the Trump endorsed candidates tonight statewide. So you have Evett, who's likely headed to a runoff, Trump endorsed. You have Cody Simpson, who's likely headed to a runoff, Trump endorsed. Stumbo could or could not make the runoff. The question is, coming off last week's Iowa's gubernatorial race where the Trump endorsed candidate did not make it, the question is the vibration of Donald Trump vibrating enough downstream to some of these races? And I made this point in the break earlier, is that when it comes to Trump, there's a difference between endorsement and support. He's given his support to candidates in South Carolina by way of a post. When he gives his full throttle endorsement, that means he's showing up, he's doing rallies, he's spending money from his political organization, which is sitting on $500 million, and we've seen the difference in those two.
Yeah, let's take you back even to 2018. You'll remember it was the runoff between Governor Henry McMaster and John Warren at the time. President Trump coming into town on the eve of that runoff, holding a rally at Airport High School, stumping for then Governor McMaster to try and get him.
Let me just interject one thing. Lena says that Johnson is about to walk out. So just for our production team, will y'all pop up that shot that we have at the Johnson headquarters? We want to make sure we listen in. Well, it looks like he's speaking. It has the microphone. So if we have audio, let's go ahead and listen in to the Johnson campaign headquarters tonight, where they are celebrating him becoming the Democratic nominee for governor in South Carolina. There's a lot of hugging going on. Yeah, I was going to say, when you all hear him start speaking, I mean, obviously this is a big moment to take in. And I don't want to get ahead of the process, but obviously the next step for this campaign will be who he picks for his lieutenant governor. So we'll have our experts weigh in. What do you think a successful ticket for Jermaine Johnson looks like?
Yeah.
Who knows?
well, look, I'll say this. As a sports fan, Jermaine was a college athlete at the College of Charleston. Politics is a game of matchups. So I think it could largely depend on who's on the other side and who he's running against, because you have to consider geographics and demographics when you think about a lieutenant governor's pick. Very rarely do you see people not take those factors into the equation when picking a running mate.
So yeah, this almost seemed resounding. And if you want to go ahead and put up that shot once again, you just look at the optics of something like this, because after all, the question starts to bubble up. Is this a changing of the guard in a way in the Democratic Party here in South Carolina? The old guard, perhaps, Billy Webster thought he might do a little bit better, but that was not the case tonight, Joel.
Greg, there are two thoughts that come to my mind right now.
Hold on, Joel. I'm sorry to interrupt. We just got word
thought
from our producer that Jermaine is now speaking from the microphone, so let's listen in.
Your Democratic nominee for governor of South Carolina, y'all. When I tell you, I'm at a loss for words this evening. Oh, my goodness. I need to thank some people first. First, like I said, I need to thank my beautiful wife. Y'all's next first lady, y'all. I want to thank my children for being here. My children down front here. I need to thank all of my family members that are here right now. My sister flew in from Minnesota. My niece flew in to be a part of this here. All of my in-laws who've adopted me to make me a cousin, a nephew, a brother, my family members, all of my friends, my supporters. Y'all, I cannot even express to you how thankful I am for having all of you standing with me through all of this. It has been a grueling year and some change. Oh my God. This is a moment right now that is going to go down in history. We made history. History's been made. And I want to thank my pastor who's in here, Pastor Sammy Wade, who's over here. There's a reason why I chose this facility this evening. Because back in 2015, I held my very first, after I retired from basketball, I held my very first event when I created my nonprofit organization. And I remember trying to get people together so I can teach them about second opportunities and things. And I held my first event in that room right there. And it was raining really bad that day. And I remember I catered a bunch of food and only about 3 people showed up. And I remember that moment. And then the next year after that, I was in that room over there, and that's where I advocated for a young man who had been stopped 3 times in 3 days by the police. And y'all have heard me tell this story before, and it happened in that room right there, and that's when I met State Representative Joe Neal. And that's the individual who taught me about politics. He's the one who taught me about what it meant to be a servant leader, how to show up for people in your communities. And I will never forget that moment. I will never forget what that meant for me and what it did for my life to go forward. And now, after defeating a 22-year incumbent to become the first African American and the youngest to represent that district, we have continued on to make more history, to do amazing things for the people of South Carolina. And I want y'all to know that this victory here this evening does not belong to me alone. It belongs to everybody in this room. Everybody standing behind me right here. I thank you. I thank you for standing with me when it was not popular to do so. I thank you for standing with me when they said I wasn't electable. They said I wasn't electable. I thank you for standing with me when they said you need to be a multimillionaire or a billionaire to win this. But what we showed tonight is that when the people speak, they cannot be ignored because it's people powered. And now we truly will continue this mission. We have the opportunity to go on and to build this new South Carolina that we've been talking about. We are going to celebrate tonight. We are going to, because this is a monumental moment for every last one of us. So I'm telling you right now, celebrate, enjoy it, because you all are a part of history. Forever, in my heart, a part of history. But tomorrow, we're going to get back to work. We're going to hit the ground running. And we're going to do what we have to do. And I want to take this moment. to thank the other 2 candidates that were in this race. because it was not easy. It was not easy when you have signs all over the state. They have commercials on every channel. Yeah. They've got ads everywhere.
All right, everyone, you've been listening to the victory speech tonight for Dr. Jermaine Johnson, who has now won the Democratic nomination in the gubernatorial race here in South Carolina. Our panel joining us, and we have a new member of the panel joining us via Zoom, political analyst Joel Sawyer, who we'll get to in just a moment. But Antoine, I'm going to come to you because they were yelling New SC, a lot of enthusiasm there. And we're friends, but I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because you and Bakari took some heat for endorsing Billy Webster. And, you know, people had different reasons that they felt like you should have supported Jermaine Johnson. What is your response to those folks tonight?
I'm happy for Jermaine Johnson. I'm happy that the process worked. Democracy is a gift, not a guarantee, and we get a chance to express ourselves every 2 to 4 years in any given situation. The winds of change are blowing all across this country, and I think Jermaine Johnson represents a new generation of politicians, a new way of doing business, and a new way that voters have chosen to express themselves, and I'm happy about that. But the most important thing Democrats can do in this moment is unify around our ticket. We are living in a moment where black political representation is on the verge of being exterminated because as a party in a presidential election of 2016, we did not unify around the ticket. We cannot afford to do that in a state that traditionally votes red like South Carolina does. Jermaine Johnson is now going to have to bring together independents and moderate Republicans or disaffected voters if he wants to be successful. I think all of us as Democrats have a charge, opportunity, and an obligation to rally behind him.
Yeah, so the winds of change are blowing, says Antoine. What do you say, Joel?
Well, you know, again, and it's to take nothing away from Billy. Billy's been around a long time. He's a well-respected business guy. You won't find anybody to say a bad thing about Billy Webster, but Jermaine caught fire in a bottle right now. I mean, he really did. He caught lightning at the most important time, and I agree with Antoine. I was just thinking back. I think the last time we had an African-American candidate for governor in either party would have been 1990. Theo Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
Theo
the
Mitchell.
Nominee, because Mia McLeod ran, but
yeah, the nominee. Mm-hmm. Jermaine is a remarkable guy. I think his running mate choice will be interesting. We were talking about this before he came out and spoke. The two models that I can think about are, does he go young and like Bill Clinton, Al Gore, something new, or does he pick maybe someone with more experience and somebody who could be like Joe Biden was to Barack Obama, somebody who's been through the process, a little more experience, knows South Carolina, maybe in their 50s or 60s. It's going to be an interesting choice, Antoine.
In the primary, you make a choice. In the general election, you're given a choice. That's the difference between the two races between now and the fall. And so voters are going to be given a choice on both sides. Jermaine is now the choice for those of us who wear the blue jersey.
The Wilson campaign just sent out a news release saying that he has advanced to the runoff. We're standing by, so as soon as he steps to the podium to speak or on the stage, we'll go to that live. But Katrina, I want to come to you first because I've been seeing an increasing following on your social media page where you've been giving your front porch talks and assessments of the candidates. When you think about, and you talk about how you started off as an independent, when you think about what an electable ticket looks like in South Carolina right now, particularly framing the path ahead for Jermaine Johnson, what do you think that looks like?
I think, excuse me, I think Jermaine is the young, advanced, excitable, you know, he's got the excitement behind him. I think he needs somebody, you know, as Joel said, he can either find somebody young or somebody older with wisdom, somebody that's been there, somebody that knows the system, somebody that also can work with him to get the people he can't draw. Also somebody moderate. He's got to have somebody moderate from, you know, that can draw the people that he can't draw. He's got the young black vote. I think he has the young black vote. I think he had, if you look at the crowd there, well, they're not there right now, but you look at the people that are there, he's got the older black vote, the African Americans, but he needs to pull some of those moderate Republicans who aren't happy with the choices they had the past 2 weeks. So he needs to pull those people. He needs to pull the moderate Democrats that aren't happy with the too far left. So I think if he finds that person, and that's going to be his, his choice, and I think Jermaine's smart enough to find the right person.
Let me just say, let's use the word balance, because I think he won tonight because he put together an interesting coalition: young, black, white, brown. I think older, not so older, moderate, progressive, however you want to describe it. And I do believe some Republicans voted in the Democratic primary for Jermaine Johnson tonight. But I think going forward, talking about balance, he's going to need to have someone on the ticket who offers to the electorate what he does not offer. And pretty soon the Republicans are going to start to tear him down so we can figure out what those things are. But quickly he's going to have to offer what he does not offer himself as a candidate.
Yeah, that race will definitely take shape before too long, no doubt about it. We also wanted to get to some breaking news that we have in the Republican race senatorial primary. Lindsey Graham has won. The Associated Press confirming that Lindsey Graham has won the Republican primary in that senatorial primary. Obviously a longstanding and a tenured senator here in our state. And we want to get with our Joel Sawyer, who's standing by. Joel, not necessarily a surprise here with Lindsey Graham being able to come out of this primary. I would say some of the ads between Lindsey Graham and Mark Lynch were some of the more
that
wild
swamp ad
of the cycle.
I had to rewind and watch that again.
But, we saw Annie Andrews really cruise earlier this evening in the Democratic side, shaping up for a pretty strong contrast come November. Give us your take on that Senate race so far.
I mean, I hate to rain on this parade, but South Carolina is still a red state, and I expect Republicans to sweep statewide in November pretty handily. There's not been enough of a demographic shift. There's not been enough of a shift in political conditions in South Carolina for a Democrat to stand any realistic shot of winning the U.S. Senate or win any of these statewide races. I don't think that the Democrats could have picked anyone better than Jermaine Johnson or Annie Andrews. Not that they're going to win, or not that they have really any realistic chance of winning, but can they drive voter turnout to win in some of those either local elections or some of those House races that, quite frankly, Democrats should not have lost in the past several years. So look, I mean, I think that this is the best possible slate for Democrats to have, but it's not going to be enough.
Joel, I'm going to come to you back to back since you're just joining the panel. We appreciate you making time tonight because I know you had to make your rounds for election night. We just got word it's an official runoff between Pamela Evette and Alan Wilson. Game that matchup for us.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be an exciting couple of weeks. I think that Pamela Evette is, as she is going to continue to rely on the Trump endorsement. I think it's going to be her hope that Trump will come in and do some sort of event, cut an ad, something like that, because I think she really needs that to put herself in the best possible position. Alan Wilson, look, I think that both of these, particularly Alan Wilson is in he's in a good position, but at the same time, you have to walk a little bit more of a tightrope than he would like to walk in this case, because on one hand you're trying to present yourself as as a new face, as not as a continuation of the past 10 years of this administration, or 8 years in the case of how long Evette has been there. But if you look at polling, Republicans for the most part believe that South Carolina is on the right track, and that and President Trump continues to be very popular. So it'll be interesting to see how they contrast themselves. And when I say contrast, I see what kind of attack ads we see. What kind of attack ads we see in the next 2 weeks. As this really shapes up.
Yeah, we've seen plenty of those so far, and you can assume that they will continue. But again, the runoff is set between Pamela Evette and Alan Wilson. 2 weeks from tonight, that will be decided. And were you surprised in any way, Joel, just real quickly, at how close this was? Because again, only separated by a couple of points, and for whatever might have been made about potential insurgency with Rom Reddy, it didn't appear that really panned out.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the Trump endorsement really turned this race on its head. I think if you were looking at the race, 10 days ago versus looking at it now, it may have been a different result minus that Trump endorsement. That moved, I think the numbers bear this out, moved a lot of undecideds into Pamela Evit's corner. That being said, when you have the Trump endorsement factor, that's going to move a lot of people to her. And when you think about Alan Wilson, look, I mean, he was leading in most polls the entire time. It's not a surprise that they were the top two vote getters. I think it'll be interesting to see who finishes third when all the votes are counted between Reddy and Norman. And Nancy Mace, look, I mean, she polled pretty well early on, but I think a lot of that was just what we call soft name ID in the business, when people know who the candidate is, but they don't really know much about them. And I think some of her early support was really indicative of that. And as people found out more about her, they moved off of her. As people found more about Alan Wilson and Pam Evit, they moved towards them, particularly in light of the Trump endorsement.
Really?
All right, Joel, certainly appreciate it. And we're going to get back with our panel here. Yeah. Your reaction, Antoine, runoff between Pamela Evit and Alan Wilson. Who has the advantage there?
I think in this scenario, second place is a good place to be, because you arguably have more room to grow. I think that Mace's support may have in some ways hit some sort of ceiling. When you look at Wilson's support and the other candidates down behind them, that means all those people did not think that she deserved to be their first place choice. So I think Alan has the most room to grow. He certainly has name ID. He will have a big voting block coming out of the Midlands, Lexington County, a very well-known traditional voting block. I think that helps him. The key is going to be whether Donald Trump inserts himself into the race by coming here or spending money to boost his candidates who are going to be in the runoff, which could be two other candidates, the ag race as well as the Attorney General race.
Well, Katrina, it's so interesting because President Trump did endorse, I should say, Joe Wilson, but he did not endorse Alan Wilson. And now to see if he's, and we were talking, before we went on our digital coverage tonight, and I think all three of you were in agreement, correct me if I'm wrong, but that Pamela Evit would not have been in the runoff tonight without this endorsement from Donald Trump.
Right, but since she did have it, I think it boosted her. And I'm on board with Antoine here that if he comes here, I think, that will help her chances of winning, in the runoff. So I'm looking to see if he comes, he gives her money and, backs her, that will be a big help. And since he will probably have more people in the runoff, the AG race and the ag race, I think he may, make a trip to South Carolina.
Yeah, again, we go back to 2018 on the eve of the runoff when he showed up for Henry McMaster right here in Columbia, the Airport High School in West Columbia, and Henry McMaster cruised to victory the following night over John Warren. So it is a possibility. I guess what I would ask is the over-under on whether or not we actually expect a presidential visit. Hard to...
Well, and let me frame this question, Joel, as you jump in and don't lose your train of thought, but the other Joel David Sawyer, was pretty convinced that Democrats just don't have a shot on this statewide ticket. What is your assessment about the electability of Jermaine Johnson and even Devin
most Joels are pretty smart, and usually, hey, Joel, I want to go back real quick. I'm going to get to Jermaine Johnson. I want to go back to this. We need to think about where Ralph Norman and Ron Reddy supporters go in this runoff. Yeah. I mean, Nancy Mace was fifth, right? But those two guys, as of now, they got sitting at close to 100,000 votes, and we still have another 30% in, right? So it could be 120,000 plus votes up for grab. Where do their voters go? Do they all coalesce around Alan Wilson because none of them got the Trump endorsement, and they're all very upset about that? Do some of them make nice and go back to the lieutenant governor? That's a big question. Electability, Judy, I'm glad you asked that. And I think one of the reasons Jermaine won tonight is because I think voters are tired of hearing about who has better electability than others, right? You know, sure, on the surface, somebody's going to say you got a young African-American male in South Carolina, his electability is a challenge. I think times are changing. I think we saw that tonight, and I think voters don't like to be told who is more electable than not. Clearly, just because we're a deep red state, the odds makers are going to put Jermaine at an underdog, but you never say never. This is a guy who 2 months ago was considering getting out of the race, and tonight he won by an historic landslide. So it'll be fascinating to see how this unfolds.
And to correct my good friend, the other Joel, he says that mostly South Carolinians are happy about what they have, but the Winthrop polling just 2 weeks ago said differently. It indicated that the affordability conversation is a real conversation, and the fact that Republicans have been in charge of the state for 2 decades, you have to blame someone for the affordability crisis in the state, and you cannot not blame the people who are in charge. Does that translate to voter success? We don't know, but when you talk about framing the issues, and the number one thing South Carolinians are facing, it's affordability.
Well, to help our viewers at home, I'm going to refer to our Zoom Joel as Sawyer, so that everybody knows which Joel we're talking to. But I'm going to give you an opportunity to rebut not only Antoine's statement, but I'm also thinking about the fact that 1 week from tonight, we will have a runoff debate between Alan Wilson and Pamela Evett.
If she shows up.
Hold on. Well, she says she's coming. She says she's coming. But hold on, Sawyer. We'll come back to you in just a moment because we understand that Alan Wilson has stepped out to address his supporters tonight. So let's pull that live shot up and let's listen in.
I can't hear you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to first start off by saying thank you to Mike Rickenbaugh. I could not have chosen a better running mate to be my partner in this journey. That's right. Thank you. I want to tell all of you something. When I was thinking about who I was going to pick to be my running mate this past fall, I wanted someone who would be an inspirational leader, someone who was aspirational, someone who would inspire people and bring people together, someone who would push me beyond my limits to help me be the best candidate and the best governor I could be. And I found that person, and I decided to make her husband my running mate. That's Sharice Rickenbaugh, y'all kidding. Like every single day that I have been on this campaign trail with you, we have talked every night. You've been my first call in the morning, my last call at night. You have ratified and reaffirmed that I have great judgment. Thank you, brother. I love you, and you're going to be an amazing lieutenant governor. Ladies and gentlemen, I also want to start off by thanking my wife, Jennifer. If it wasn't for her support, I could not do this. And my children, Michael and Anna Grace, they're really the reason. They are what drives me. I love you, kids. I'm so proud of you. The campaign team that we assembled, our staff, if I start naming people, I'm going to leave someone out, but I'm looking around and I'm seeing you. I want to thank you all. Thank you all for what you've done. I'm looking over here and I'm seeing my mother Roxanne. I'm seeing my brothers. I see cousins standing there, extended family. Guys, I feel so small right now with so many of you just looking at me. My friends, my family, my supporters, the campaign team that's been out there knocking on thousands of doors, making tens of thousands of phone calls, sending out letters, postcards, calling people, my social media warriors, my quick reaction force, my veterans who are out there fighting for me. Thank you. Because I did not win this. I did not get a slot and win a slot to the runoff. We did. It was you that got us there. I want to thank those who invested, not just their time, their energy, and their talents, but their money. These things are expensive. And the financial supporters out there, I'll be calling you first thing in the morning. But you made it possible. You put the gas in the car for us to take our mission, our vision for the state of South Carolina. That change is coming. The status quo will happen no more. And I want to thank you who supported me financially by allowing us to get this message out to the people of South Carolina. I also want to thank God. Many of you have heard my faith journey. And it's by God's providence that I'm here tonight. Earlier today, I got up this morning and I prayed to God because I didn't know what the results would be today. I believed them. I believed we would be here tonight. But I prayed to God not to win this race, but to give me the grace to accept whatever his will was. And if his will was for me not to be here tonight going into this next phase, this next chapter, then I needed the grace to accept that. And if it was his will for me to wake up in the morning and begin the next 2-week campaign, to give me the courage and the fortitude to rise to the task he's laid before me. And I give all the glory to God and my Savior Jesus Christ. Thank you.
All right, we were just listening to Alan Wilson respond and give his speech after a runoff has now been called between Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette and, of course, Alan Wilson for the Republican primary. We're bringing Dr. Todd Shaw back into the conversation. So at this point, who really benefits more from a clean two-person race, the candidate who finished first or the candidate who now becomes the alternative?
You know, it depends on that margin, but as previous panelists were saying, where did the rest of the voters go who voted for the third, fourth, and fifth candidates, right? And so how do you consolidate that vote? You know, right now you're seeing sort of a 4-point difference, roughly speaking, or a little bit of a 4-point difference between the candidates. So that's still relatively close on the GOP side for governor. Yeah.
The biggest pool of persuadable voters, let's talk about them.
Right.
Are they coming from the upstate, the Midlands, or the low country?
Well, it's intriguing. I look at this cluster of votes for Norman in the dead center of the upstate, right? And again, that's a pool that's quite important to a GOP nominee. And so where do those voters go from Norman? Even that's important.
Yeah.
You know, further down you look at the Ram Reddy in the low country, and then let's take a look at Mace.
Nancy Mace. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. So
let's bring it back to all the totals there.
all the totals. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think you know, again, if we're just looking at this geographically, that pool right there in the center, those counties right there in the center in terms of the upstate, that's intriguing. And so Norman would certainly make a case about whose support he would lend his support to, and how could that be the critical difference between candidates. Yeah.
Do you think each candidate has some place to grow?
I believe so.
Okay.
I mean, because when you're talking about, and this is still early, and we still have to have the totals, although they're projected winners. So if you see that, they definitely have places to go, because those votes are going to be redistributed somewhere on each side, right?
And when we think about tonight's results, do you believe those were driven by endorsement or name recognition?
You know, I do think that endorsements, particularly on the GOP side, of course matters. You know, but President Trump is still, fundamentally influential in his party. He's still a leader of his party, and it really does matter. But not only just the governor's race, as has been said, the attorney general's race, the ag commissioner race. We're going to kind of see, given the question around affordability, the other issues that are coming to the fore, there's some ways in which there's a little peeling off, particularly among GOP voters, even given they may certainly still fundamentally respect Trump.
And we're standing by right now for Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette to take the stage in Greenville, where our Hannah Burbank is, and we'll be listening in live for her speech after the runoff has been called. But let's take a look at some of the other races. We know just a short time ago, Jermaine Johnson winning by a landslide when it comes to being the nominee for the Democratic Party. Somewhat historic when you consider an African-American nominee in South Carolina for governor, specifically for the Democratic primary. And then we're taking a look at the history. This is something neat that we have here. We can bring this up full and probably drop the super. Thank you, guys. So in 2018, there were about 240,000 people that came. And look at that spike there.
It is a spike.
To what we're seeing now in 2026. What's your take?
Well, if you look at that 280,000 votes all total, and we know that doesn't even quite reflect, or that's only some reflection of that early vote total, which was quite historic this time around. Yeah. So we're going to be in excess of that number. And this, I wouldn't be surprised if this overall on both sides, you see a high turnout election, relatively speaking, around 22 to 25%.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that number just spiked right up there. And
that's right.
What we're seeing there.
Right.
And let's go back to our totals and take a look at what we're seeing as far as where Jermaine Johnson did a good job at. So really, if you look at the whole state of South Carolina, I mean, he dominated, pretty much everything.
Everywhere.
Fairfield, Richland County, where he's active, Kershaw County, Saluda, Lexington. You mentioned Lexington earlier. What was the thing about Lexington that you were keeping your eye on?
Well, Lexington County being sort of an interesting bellwether county, particularly for Republican support, and it's sort of if you will, a counterbalance to Richland County. Lexington and Richland sort of are opposites of each other, sort of from a GOP Democratic side. But also, it matters that from the standpoint of over on the GOP side, with Alan Wilson, that he has a base in Lexington County. So it's interesting that there may be some interesting competition.
Absolutely. And then let's take a look at the commissioner race for agriculture here in South Carolina. Cody Simpson was endorsed by President Trump, but Danny Ford still coming closely behind him. Runoff, possibly?
Quite possibly a runoff, right? And that's pretty darn close in that regard, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so we're taking a look at that. Also, school superintendent race. We've been closely watching that. The Democratic primary nominee will face Ellen Weaver come November. And right now we're seeing Sylvia Wright leading the race so far. It hasn't been called just yet. Lisa Ellis trailing behind her. Lisa Ellis actually ran against Ellen Weaver a couple of years back for this position as well. What does this say about what we're seeing the results here with Sylvia Wright really, covering the map now?
Yeah, it's intriguing to me that, of course, and it's math. It's intriguing to me that, of course, these candidates that are pulling well over 50%. They're getting 50% in districts throughout the state, in counties throughout the state. And so, they'll at least be making a case about how am I competitive from a statewide perspective because I'm pulling the support in counties throughout.
And let's take a look at State House race 64. I pulled this one up because you may remember 2 years ago, Representative Fawn Petalito flipped this seat. This was always a seat held by Democrats. Kevin Johnson held this seat for several years. You also had John Land as well. And then a couple of years ago, it flipped. Right now, we're seeing Michelle Demery leading right now, but that could possibly be a close race to watch to see what will happen again come November.
Yes, and I mean, and particularly in the current period where we've had one party, the GOP, have a supermajority, sort of any possibilities of flips in these state house races are really quite important.
All righty. Well, we will continue to keep an eye on all of our statewide races, including our state house races as well. Again, we do know that Pamela Evette, Alan Wilson headed into a runoff. And when it comes to the Democratic side, Jermaine Johnson in the gubernatorial race is now the Democratic nominee. As we are waiting for Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette to take the stage, let's check back in with Judy and Greg and our analysts to get some more insight on South Carolina primary night.
Great insight, Billy, from Dr. Shaw there. So thank you both very much. We want to bring Joel David Sawyer back into the conversation with our panel as well. Joel, I'm just obsessed almost now with this debate that's coming up 1 week from tonight between Pamela Evette and Alan Wilson. Our in-house panelists were wondering, is Evette going to show up? I will say that she did officially commit to the debate. Antoine's still not convinced she's going to show up. She thinks a big campaign event with a high-profile endorser, it might preempt the debate. But what do you think, if they both do show up on the debate stage, what will be the key for them on that night?
I think it's a little bit. I think it's a little bit trickier for Alan in that you have to differentiate yourself from a popular president and a popular governor without denigrating their accomplishments and their popularity, right? So I think that's going to be somewhat difficult to do. I think what the Attorney General Alan Wilson is going to try to do is to kind of lean heavily on his record as Attorney General and to talk about the accomplishments that he has in his office. Whereas Pamela Abbott, I think, is going to lean very heavily on the Trump endorsement and excuse me, and in her position in the McMaster administration. In thinking about the debate that she was at, there wasn't much daylight between them on particular issues. So I think it'll be interesting, as panelists and as moderators, trying to think of some of those ways that you can draw them out and have clear lines of differentiation between the two of them. But I think Abbott largely is going to try to kind of play it safe. Alan has to again skate that tightrope. And the other part of it too is, and I think that Joel Lurie alluded to this a little while ago, is like, where do those go? Where do these other voters go? There's a lot of votes still being counted, but Alan Wilson and Pamela Abbott, and I hate to oversimplify it like this, but they are essentially a little bit more of a quote unquote establishment lane versus the Ralph Norman, Nancy Mace, Ron Reddy kind of burn it all down and start over lane, right? And so for those people, a significant part of the electorate, almost half who were saying, none of the above to the more established, well-known candidates, how do you convince them? How do you convince that very significant chunk of the electorate that you are going to be the person to listen to them and carry their torch going forward?
And so that's the question, Joel. Do you see, we already saw earlier tonight Nancy Mace endorsing Alan Wilson. The question is, will Ron Reddy or Ralph Norman potentially endorse an Alan Wilson? And you kind of hit on where those voters might go. I guess it's kind of anyone's guess, especially as you say, there's not too much daylight between them on the issues.
Yeah, and you look, I think that some further daylight may establish itself. I mean, it's we've got 14 days. I would be surprised based upon all of his public statements and just kind of who he is as a political figure, if Ron Reddy endorses either one of them. I could be wrong about that, but I suspect he's probably going to sit tight and not endorse either, and say that what he said all along is this is between the people of South Carolina and in these two candidates, it's who am I to endorse? Ralph Norman is a little bit more is a little bit more interesting in terms of what he may or may not do. One thing that's important to remember about Ralph Norman is that, he did raise a fairly significant amount of money, but he was also largely a self-funder, right? So one of the things you're competing for in this is not just votes, but you're competing for resources as well. You're competing for those very scarce fundraising dollars that, in fundraising in political races like this is all about leveraging time. You can't go around and convince every single voter. Right. So you have to spend a whole lot of money on TV ads, mail pieces, digital ads, text to put your message in front of those voters, because you can't go and talk to every single one of them. Right. And so, does Ralph Norman bring anything to bear from a fundraising standpoint? Probably not. But Ralph Norman does bring something to bear from that. That burn it all down Freedom Caucus set, whatever you want to call them. And, does he endorse somebody? A. B. Does he bring those votes? Can he endorse in a credible way to say, you were unhappy with the entire Columbia establishment, but between these two people, I pick A or B, or do some of those people just stay home? It'll be really interesting to see what happens in terms of the runoff participation. We know it's going to be, or historically we know it's going to be somewhat lower than the primary night participation. And we'll see just how many of those people show back up and who shows back up. Just modeling this electorate has been very difficult so far, which is why there's been so much variation in the polling throughout.
Joel Sawyer, thank you so much for your insights on that. And as we bring it back to our panel here, again, the runoff 2 weeks from tonight, 14 days to come up with perhaps some of that daylight or some differentiation, a contrast between these two. Where do you see this race, Antoine?
Well, I think they're going to try to out-Trump each other. So that's like number one. But number two, my friend Joe talked about daylight on the issues. I have not seen one Republican candidate actually talk about issues that a governor in South Carolina can actually control and deal with. We are a legislative heavy state. The governor does not have that much influence on policy. And when it comes to the issues that are facing South Carolinians, affordability leading that conversation, I have not heard one candidate even mention how they will deal with the affordability crisis, healthcare, housing, infrastructure, and growth to our state. They're talking about open borders. The only border issue we have in South Carolina is the people in Lexington County don't want the people in Richland County moving across the border. And so these things that they've been talking about, like from a campaign perspective, do not apply to what the governor of South Carolina can actually do. So I think this debate is going to be critical in holding them accountable to what the issues really are. The other caveat, and two other caveats, Wilson has picked his lieutenant governor, his running mate. Pamela has not. We'll see what that means and how that impacts the race going forward. Secondly, people who did not vote in this either primary can now come out and vote in the Republican runoff. That could have some sort of implications or impact when you talk about this race being a game of inches and how close it will be.
Katrina, we just got some additional news from our digital director upstairs, Michael Owens. Goldfinch and Stumbo headed to a runoff for Attorney General.
Trump and no Trump.
Well, that could play both ways. If Trump comes down here, like I said before, that could play in that. I don't know how vested Trump is in this Stumbo race, because before Stumbo ran for Attorney General, I didn't know who Stumbo was. I truly didn't. I knew who Goldfinch was because I served in the Senate with him. So, he's been a senator for several years now. I think he's in his second term. So I knew who he was, but I don't know that anybody knows that much about the Attorney General. So, the Trump endorsement will probably help him, but I think people need to know what the Attorney General really does. The average person doesn't know what the Attorney General really does.
Right.
It's just like we were talking about the governor's race. I got to get back to this because it's driving me crazy.
Yes, do it, absolutely.
But you're talking about the governor's race, and like Antoine was saying, people think the governor can do all this, and they're talking about cutting taxes, they're talking about doing all this. They can't do that.
That's right.
The legislature does all that. Tell me something you can do. And I think some of the questions that they need to be asked is, what are you really going to do? Quit telling me that Alan Wilson's a bad person or Pamela Evitts a terrible person, because y'all really both like each other when you leave the room. So don't be telling me that. Don't send me all this nasty mail. Tell me what you are going to do for the people of South Carolina. That's what I want to hear. What are you going to do to make my life better? How are you going to help the children of South Carolina or the senior citizens of South Carolina? What legislation are you going to push before the Senate and the House that's going to make it a better place to live for South Carolina? Stop, telling me you're going to do things that you can't do without working together with the legislature. Because you ain't got no power, Governor.
As the kids say, you ain't got it.
Well, and the thing is, I think when you talk about some of these issues, whether or not they'll come to the fore in a runoff here in the next 2 weeks, Antoine, to your point, I think, again, the Trump dynamic to all of this probably looms larger than most any issue in that race. Joel, when you talk about, when we go back to that Attorney General race, you have a Stumbo and a Goldfinch and not a Pasco advancing in that runoff. Once again, sometimes it's who you're voting against in a race like that really kind of made the difference there.
So, Greg, it was really interesting on the podcast that Senator Shaheen and I have. We interviewed all three candidates in over about a 2-week period. All remarkably different, all bring something special to the race. Goldfinch clearly was a leader on the fundraising, and he had his sights set on Pasco, and and whoever was running the anti-Pasco PAC, they were running some brutal commercials on TV. I mean, they were just like cutting him off, not at the knees, but at the ankles, the thighs, the knees, everything.
Toes.
Yeah, I mean, it was brutal. So it'll be interesting now, does that PAC, that, this outside dark money, does that PAC turn its attention towards Solicitor Stumbo, or do they kind of just run all pro Goldfinch? I mean, Antoine said something earlier, second place is not a bad place to be. It'll be real interesting to see Goldfinch and Stumbo, because at the end of the day, Goldfinch is still going to have significantly more resources, and in a runoff, that really matters.
Joel, Sawyer, let me come back to you, because let's flip and talk about the Democratic nominee now, because that race, many people thought there would be a runoff, and Jermaine Johnson won convincingly tonight. And Antoine just pointed out a moment ago, not the most, but one of the most remarkable things about his win tonight is he did not spend a lot of money.
No, he didn't. I mean, look, he ran he ran a lean and mean campaign, and it was enough to win. Now that's going to be a very different story in the general election. But look, I mean, you have to have, I think, at least on the Republican side, voting patterns, voting behavior are a little bit different. And I think you have to have something a little bit closer to spending parity or advertising parity or media parity, whatever you want to call it, to be able to win on the Republican side. I think if you look at, particularly, Evatt, the Trump endorsement helped a lot, but, Evatt and Associated PAC spent quite a bit of money as well. You noted, or someone noted about Goldfinch leading in the resource, war for the Attorney General. David Pasco had well over $1 million in negative ads dumped on his head for an AG race. Just absolutely brutal in terms of not just the content of the ad, but in the volume of it. And look, I think on the Democratic side, just because of the importance of grassroots, the importance of neighbor talking to neighbor in a way that is not quite as prevalent on the Republican side, you can have a little bit more surprising results in terms of the vote totals not really matching what happened on the fundraising side.
And Antoine, you wanted to make a point about the general election?
For both sides. So 2026 will be an audition for the 2028 Republican presidential primary and the 2028 Democratic primary. Look for resources and candidates who are looking to run for president to stampede on South Carolina, both with their money and with their presence, to really nationalize the statewide elections in South Carolina. That's going to have a real sense of impact, I think, on the enthusiasm and what drives the emotions of the 2026 cycle here. But just getting on the runoff, you could have three candidates Trump endorsed who are going to be in runoffs. One or two of them may not be leading going into the runoff. The question is, does the Donald Trump vibration continue to vibrate as it has other places, or is South Carolina different? And I think we won't know that until the runoffs are settled.
And I think the
just one thing I want to add on that real quick on the Attorney General. I can almost guarantee you that Donald Trump is not going to come in and endorse in this AG race.
Why do you say that?
He did already.
Because he was anti-Pasco.
I know.
I don't think that he really has a dog in the fight.
But Antoine's saying he endorsed Stumbo, so you don't think he's going to continue to support him?
Via social.
He did.
I'm sorry?
It's on Stumbo's signs. You better check
I don't
Stumbo's
think Trump
signs
has
out.
endorsed.
Joel, they're saying, I don't know this. Katrina's saying she thinks Trump endorsed Stumbo on his signs or in some capacity.
But we also know in this race,
Yeah, I
people
don't
have
believe that's
implied that they were
accurate.
endorsed by Trump, but they were not technically, officially endorsed by Trump. So maybe that's the distinction.
Yeah, Joel, I want to ask you a question. Hey, Joel, this is Joel.
Sure.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Joel, I'm going back to 1994 for a second. I'm showing my age.
Okay.
But
I was in high school, but
there
go
you
ahead.
go. All right. Well, I was just getting started in a business. Nick Theodore and Joe Riley were in a very hotly contested Democratic runoff. David Beasley was also in a runoff. I forgot who he was in a runoff against. But in the Theodore Riley race, it was a recount that lasted for a couple weeks. It was a very bitter runoff, and then the recount dragged it on. I have no doubt Alan Wilson and Pamela Evitt, whoever wins is, moves on to become the nominee, and odds would say the next governor. Whoever loses could be done with politics. If they really go hard at each other, does that benefit the Democrats?
It may, but even then, and look, I go back to this race a lot, which was 2020 Jamie Harrison versus Lindsey Graham. Jamie Harrison had $100 million. Jamie Harrison ran a perfect race from a tactical standpoint, from a messaging standpoint. You could not ask for a better candidate statewide for Democrats in terms of just executing flawlessly in a fairly favorable environment for Democrats, and he ended up basically I think a generic ballot or 2 points better than a generic ballot.
Joe, we don't want to
South Carolina is not going to elect a Democrat statewide quite yet.
Our apologies to Sawyer because we have Pamela Evitt.
Yeah, we're going to listen in. Pamela Evitt tonight in Greenville. Let's listen.
I want to start by thanking each and every one of you here and the countless supporters throughout the state who made this night possible. I can't say how much I love you, how much you mean to me. I want to first thank my family, my husband David, my mom Jenny, my children, Amanda, Joseph, Jackson, and Simon. And one person I wish could be here tonight is my dad. But I know he's looking down from heaven and he is just so proud. There will never be enough words to express the gratitude I have for all of their love and support. And lastly, I want to thank two of the greatest conservative leaders our nation has ever known. One, my friend and my mentor, Governor Henry McMaster. And President Donald J. Trump. Mr. President, thank you for your support. And I'm going to reiterate to all of you what he just said to me on the phone a moment ago. He says, we are going to fight and we are going to win this runoff big. You guys, you're going to make me cry. He said he is going to help us deliver the America First agenda right here in South Carolina. When we started this race almost a year ago, we were at 2% in our first poll. 2. We've come a long way, and tonight we punched a ticket to this runoff. South Carolina, you sent a message tonight. You spoke clearly and you said, we want a business leader, an entrepreneur, somebody who has created jobs, somebody just like Donald Trump, who's going to bring the private sector experience to government. In 2 weeks, we're going to win this runoff election, but that is just the beginning. We're going to eliminate income tax. It's your money. It belongs in your pockets, not in Columbia. We're going to slash property taxes because no South Carolinian should ever be taxed out of their home. We're going to pass full universal school choice to give South Carolina's next generation the best education possible. And we're going to fix our roads. We will stop funding woke institutions, and we will end tenure once and for all. Get rid of radical professors who are trying to indoctrinate our kids. And we are going to stand up for conservative voices and conservative values. I have never, I will never back down to the woke mob. Over these next 2 weeks, we're going to highlight a very clear contrast between myself and a career politician, Alan Wilson.
All right, everybody, we are listening to the victory speech tonight from Pamela Evette, celebrating her punching her ticket, as she said, to the runoff. We are going to do a quick wrap with our political analysts. We've got to get set for our 10 o'clock show. Antoine, we'll start with you. Sounds like we're going to possibly see a visit from President Trump. She says that she talked with him tonight. He's committed to helping her bring this race home, and she is still talking about the woke mob that did not exist at SC State.
She also said he's going to spend money. I made the point tonight, there's a difference between endorsement and support when it comes to Donald Trump. Look for him to have a visit, look for him to spend money. No political romance without finance. Alan is going to have to try to keep up with the money spending and the outside PACs to keep up.
Yeah, you know, one of the things you also heard, at least in the tail end of that speech, referring to Alan Wilson in Pamela Evette's words as a career politician, a line of attack, right here 2 weeks now from that runoff. Is that going to be the message, and at least trying to paint him as such?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think she can write off Orangeburg County tonight after the threat against SC State, right? But yeah, I think that's her message, right? You know, she's going to come at this, and if I'm running that campaign, I think that's a good message. She's the business person, you know, Alan Wilson is a career politician. But I think Alan Wilson has a tremendous record as Attorney General to run on. You know, he hasn't been in the legislature, so he hasn't had to take votes that those of us that have served can sometimes get beaten up on. He's been a great prosecutor for the state of South Carolina, and I think it's going to be a real battle, and it's going to be fascinating to watch this unfold over the next 14 days.
Yeah, we expect some pretty heavy back and forth between those two candidates. Prior to this, Alan Wilson's campaign, you know, poking at Pamela Evette, saying that she was ducking debates. And so there will be a debate, though, for this runoff. What do you anticipate hearing between these two candidates?
Okay, well, first I want to correct myself. Stumbo was not officially endorsed by Trump.
Yes,
while
Sawyer
Trump
was
did
making
not
that point,
issue a complete and total endorsement to anyone, but he did use his pro-Trump MAGA whatever on his signs, and it made it look like an endorsement. This is all out here. He used the sign branding versus reality. So it is on his signs.
Okay.
So just for the record.
So we got that
I did
clear.
see it, because I didn't want to go away sounding that way. I use that, what the lieutenant governor just said, kind of like, let's come out with the boxing gloves on. I don't like that kind of campaigning, but, you know, I guess if you're going to fight, you're going to fight. I still think they should come out telling me what you're going to do for me. I think that sounds better, but I think there's going to be a lot of money spent in the next 2 weeks in South Carolina, so if you're selling ads and printing on paper, you might make some money in the next 2 weeks.
Alan has to be very careful of how he attacks a woman running in this race.
Very interesting.
Very delicate balance.
Sawyer, we're on the clock because we got to get set for the 10 o'clock show, but I'm going to give you the final word just in terms of what you are going to be looking for over this next 14 days. How nasty is it going to get?
This is South Carolina. I think that answers your question for you. It's going to get as nasty as it can get with, you know, whatever ads are allowed on television and digital platforms. Look, it's going to be very aggressive. There's going to be a lot of negative campaigning, contrast campaigning, whatever you want to call it. I think we saw a little preview of that from Pamela Evette right now, trying to paint Alan Wilson as a career politician. And, you know, we'll see what Alan's counterpunch is in terms of contrasting himself with Evette.
Yeah, Joel, do you think a presidential visit is an inevitability in this race?
Yeah, I don't know. Look, I can tell you 100% that Pamela's people are already pushing for that. They are making that case that he needs to come down here and do that. And look, I mean, I think for them to or and I think that the sales pitch that you give to the president is that, look, this is for you. It's not for her. It's just as much for you as for her, because you've already given her your endorsement. Do you want another Iowa where your endorsed candidate did not win? So I think that President Trump has a very vested interest in proving that his endorsement can push someone over the finish line.
All right. Well, Joel David Sawyer, to our analysts live in studio, former Senator Joel Lurie, former Senator Katrina Shealy, and political strategist Antoine Seawright. Thank you all for your expertise, your insight, analysis, and keeping us entertained on this election night. That South Carolina politics never, ever disappoints.
No, it certainly does not. And of course, we have crews throughout the entire state, throughout the evening, providing up-to-the-minute results as well as reaction on this primary evening here, as we have seen some pretty incredible events, especially when it comes to the Democratic gubernatorial primary. Jermaine Johnson winning in convincing fashion, a runoff over on the Republican side between Alan Wilson, Pamela Evette, and so the stage is set for 2 weeks for tonight.
Absolutely. Of course, our thanks as well to our co-anchor Billie Jean Shaw and Dr. Todd Shaw from USC for his expertise and insight about the political map as it developed with the numbers coming in tonight. Much more coverage right now on WISTV.com. We'll be on the CW in 7 minutes at 10 o'clock and on WIS News 10 at 11 o'clock tonight, and continuing coverage with all of the results tomorrow morning on Sunrise. So keep it tuned to WIS and all of our digital platforms to stay locked in on the very latest on Decision 2026.